Mr. Gaurav Choudhury.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much. It's only fitting that the concluding session of this Delhi Lit Fest is with a person who has written a book aptly titled Echoes of Eternity, a Journey through Indian Thought from the Rigveda to the Present, which presents a multitude of perspectives given the fact that we are going through some kind of a civilizational transformation. So in the opening sentence of your book, you say that India is a civilization of Maulik Soch, which is the power of original thinking, and that is why India has survived centuries and millennia while Persian and other civilizations, including the ancient Chinese civilization, has kind of fallen by the wayside. And this has been possible due to what you describe as cerebral interrogation over centuries. But I have a more elementary question, and very similar to what A.K. Ramanujan raised in 1990. Is there an Indian way of thinking? If so, what is that?
Thank you very much, Gaurav. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here for the Delhi Literature Festival, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm afraid this session will be slightly
Short,
compressed for about 20 minutes only because I have a pressing engagement and it's been delayed since when it was scheduled. Without doubt, there is an Indian way of thinking because there is a unique Indian civilization. Countries are not political nations only. Nations were born after the Treaty of Westphalia in the 17th century. Before that, we had civilizations. And India has been one of the oldest civilizations the world has seen. As you know now, because of scientific and technological research, largely also based around the elusive river Saraswati, the dating of the Rigveda has been definitively preponed from 1500 BCE. Earlier it was 1500 before Christ, to about 3500 or 4000 BCE. And I don't have the time to go into the reasons why, but this research is pretty incontrovertible. Now, for a civilization to have had a written text, composed text, 4,000 years before the birth of Christ or before the Common Era, and to have that thought in continuity over the last 7,000 years, marked by not only continuity, antiquity, assimilation, diversity, and peaks of refinement.
Absolutely.
So it definitely indicates a unique civilization which has nurtured a unique way of thinking, which is clearly identifiable as Indian.
Absolutely. And as you rightly said, we are one of the most cerebral civilizations of the world, but irony is that we largely remain ignorant of our past. And you allude to that in great detail in your book when you say that while, long after we have achieved political freedom, the colonization of the mind, that persists. There is also the opposite reaction, opposite way of, the opposite aspect is that we tend to sometimes over-glorify things without any verifiable scientific evidence. And you say that also because the colonization of the mind persists, which you describe as hinta or some kind of inferiority that we suffer from. How do we get around this and get into a situation where we present history as it were and learn to know about it without any caricature or oversimplification?
Quite simply, in today's rapidly globalizing world, at one level, we are all global citizens. There is much that is common between what we see, what we watch, what we eat, what we wear, how we travel, how we communicate, which is global. And yet, strangely enough, cultures are not infinitely permeable. By that I mean they can never become duplicates or clones of other cultures. Cultures are unique.
Right.
And therefore, for a global citizen to retain their authenticity, it is essential to have roots in your culture. Because as I have said many times, nobody respects photocopies. And one of the reasons why the consequence of colonization, as you mentioned, is that many of us, some of the most educated, refined, competent global citizens know very little about their own culture. In fact, if I were to say that when I wrote my book on Adi Shankaracharya, whom I called one of Hinduism's greatest thinkers, perhaps the world's one of the greatest philosophers, a lot of very well-educated people in India asked me when he was born, what he wrote, what was his contribution.
Absolutely.
So we are adrift from our cultural roots, which is a natural consequence of colonization, because colonization is not about your physical subjugation.
Absolutely.
It's about the colonization of your mind, which is why we are speaking in English.
Right. You know, to what
So
extent...
So in the end, the political freedom comes, but ahista, ahista, your mind also becomes free from that colonial influence. By the way, I am not talking of insularity.
That's right.
I am not talking of chauvinism. I am not talking of xenophobia. But I am against deracination and cultural rootlessness. And my effort has been through all my books, and this book in particular, it presents to you, if you're interested, anywhere you dip into it, it's 7,000 years of the continuity of Indian thoughts, so that if you wish to familiarize yourself, who was Thirukural? What are the six systems of Hindu philosophy? What is the Brahma Sutra? What is the Arthashastra? What is the Kama Sutra? What are the Dharma Shastras? What is the Dina Ilahi? You name it, right? From the Rigveda to Abdul Kalam ji, it presents to you a panorama of Indian thought, which I believe is a must. Not because I'm trying to sell a book, I've sold enough. The point is very simple. It's a must reference book to have, because if you don't know, then frankly, you cannot either defend your civilization or fight those who try to give you a monolithic picture of who you are.
Absolutely.
You cannot fight those who say this is who you are until you yourself know who you are.
Yes, very true. You know, that's the right point to segue into something that I thought I'll ask you. You know, for some readers, one striking aspect of this book would be in the inclusions that you have made. And I have a specific reference here, which is Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. His critics would say that you probably, he had no contribution to Indian thought in the manner where he stands alongside with some of the sages and thinkers that you include in your book. However, you describe him, and I'm quoting him, you say that the remarkable social reform that has taken place in the last 100 years is due to the tireless efforts of social reformers like Savarkar. Help us understand this line of thought in defense of Mr. Savarkar.
No, first of all, I think Savarkar should be included because there were many versions of what modern India should be post-colonization. He had a particular version, but I believe disproportionate importance has been given to his 3-page tract where he spoke on Hindutva. In fact, he later diluted it himself. But somehow it's been caught on to that this is what he was saying. Actually, Savarkar wrote extensively, and I would put him in this respect at the same level as Mahatma Gandhi, on the need for social reform within Hinduism. He called them the 7 fetters, 7 bediyan. Beti bandi, roti bandi, vyavasay bandi, sparsh bandi, untouchability, intercaste dining. He said all of this has to go. In fact, he was much too radical. If those who are his greatest votaries today were to actually recall what he said, they will not know how to defend it. He said, spirituality doesn't lie in the stomach. Eat what you want, enjoy yourself, and he included meat, and other things in that, which people have forgotten about.
Absolutely. And in the same vein, some critics would probably say that you have elevated Osho, a cult hero, into a pantheon of Indian original thinkers. What's your view on that? Osho.
Yeah, I mean, when you come to the modern era, and then let me say to you, in the introduction, I say clearly that the corpus of what I could include or exclude in a 7,000 year canvas is so huge. It's unbelievably large that there is bound to be a process of selectivity. Unless I write 18 volumes and I don't have the time for it. Selectivity also indicates subjectivity. जो मुझे ठीक लगा या जिसको मैंने मौलिक समझा या जिसको मैंने महत्वपूर्ण समझा, I included in this. I believe as far as modern Indian thinking is concerned, J. Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti and Osho were original thinkers. You may like them, you may not like them, you perhaps have not read enough of them, but they were, and I have included them.
In your book, you expend considerable space on the Bhakti movement, and very rightly so, and it acted as a shield, as you describe, against proselytizing powers of Islamic invaders, because it ended up actually upending a lot of orthodoxies, social attitudes that existed at that point in time, including caste barriers. In that context, and it's very topical now, we are in the middle of carrying out a caste census. What's your view on that?
First of all, I think it's a rather radical juxtaposition, caste census with the Bhakti movement.
Yeah.
However, I will take it at face value because I have views on both. I've just written a column 2 days ago for CNN News 18 and First Post on the caste census. The Bhakti movement, let me say to this audience and all of you, some of you are more knowledgeable than me, was the most remarkable movement in recent times in the evolution of any one religion, in this case the Hindu faith, Sanatan Dharma or Hinduism. 600 years. There was an outpouring of poetry in our own languages across India, which took Hinduism out of the cloistered sanctum sanctorums of Sanskrit and the Brahmanical class to the people. And it was entirely devotional. I mean, just look at the canvas. In Maharashtra, you have Namdev, Tukaram, you have Chaitanya, you have Vidyapati, you have Chandidas, you have Surdas, you have Govindas, you have Tulsidas. Towards the south, you have Allama Prabhu, Basavanna, Potana. Among the women, you have Mirabai, you have Antal, you have Mahadevi Akka. I mean, I'm just naming a few. These were people who transcended the rigidity of caste, even community, wrote in their own language and basically took Hinduism to the people where the only animating spirit was devotion and took it in their own language. Hinduism became a mass movement then, and it lasted for 600 years.
So would it be right to say that in many ways the Bhakti movement across India's geographical landscape and socio-cultural landscape also sowed the first seeds of progressive literature in vernacular languages in India? Would that be a right observation?
Without doubt, I think that without the Bhakti movement, some of the empowerment that came in our own languages, and that's why I've particularly included from the north, Ramdhari Singh Dinkar and Maithili Sharan Gupt, because both were leaders of a certain genre of writing, and Maithili Sharan Gupt of Khadi Boli. I've also included Urdu poetry. There is Mir, there is Ghalib, there is Bahadur Shah Zafar, there is Zauq, there is Sahir Ludhianvi. Now somebody can ask me why not some others? Well, again, it's subjectivity and also this constriction of space. I mean, Urdu poetry is something I'm familiar with. My first book was a biography of Mirza Ghalib. So therefore, there is a full selection. Now, what is the purpose? The purpose is not that this has everything. The purpose is that if you read something from this, it may ignite your curiosity to know a little more about either that or something else, because it gives you a glimpse of the remarkable depth and range of Indian thought over such a long period.
Absolutely. And another crucial aspect, and which you allude in great detail about the Bhakti movement, is also the emergence of trailblazing women devotees who just refuse to be straitjacketed into insubordination and inferiority to men. Mirabai is an example. She was born in 1498 and upended a lot of orthodoxies of those time social attitudes. However, we are now in 2025 and gender equality is still very, very prevalent. Do you think we have regressed a bit since then?
No, I think that in spite of all the social reform, laws, constitutional guarantees, there are two evils that we have not been able to conquer. One is the oppression, exploitation, and discrimination of the caste system, and the other is gender disparity. It's the truth. And that is a fight that is still to be fought. We need another bhakti movement. We need another movement. बहुत से आंदोलन चाहिए अभी. And what in fact I'm afraid is that perhaps Hinduism, because you're largely talking about that, is moving into very, very narrow-minded hands, which define it in very conservative ways and perpetuate old stereotypes rather than thinking about bringing in the new. This is a danger we must all face and fight.
Absolutely. And final question on short one on Akbar's Dini Ilahi or Tawhid Ilahi, divine monotheism. It disappeared soon after Akbar's death. Was it because it was more structured as a code of governance rather than a religion founded on deep foundational philosophy?
You see, first of all, let me be clear. The degree of plunder, pillage, destruction in the name of religion and proselytization that marked the Islamic invasion cannot be glossed over. Will Durant has called it one of the bloodiest chapters of Indian history. So let's accept that. There's no point falsifying history. What is remarkable is that in spite of that, over a period of time, there is something in this soil that there did emerge in many areas what is called Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, or a syncretic culture in which there were elements of both. Now, Akbar symbolized perhaps the most refined aspect of that time by the time of the 16th century, 15th century, 16th century. And his mother was Hindu. There has been a lot of, should I say, intercultural assimilation. And Deen-e Ilahi was a consequence of that. But it did not have the endorsement of either the ulema, which was powerful, nor by his successor, Jahangir, nor, of course, by his predecessor. So, there was a fight back during his own time by the entrenched clerical ulema against what seemed to be the excessively diluted Islam which Akbar seemed to be espousing. And so, therefore, there was a fight back. And ultimately, it's unfortunate that Dara Shikoh did not become the king under Aurangzeb. And I don't want to vilify anybody, but certainly you saw all the most regressive tendencies during this period sort of coming to the fore.
Thank you so much, Pavan Varma, for taking the time out and dropping by to have